Today on the guitar department, I'm going to show you how to change a string on a couple different types of guitars, as well as a few other pieces of general maintenance advice. We'll have an all-new lick of the week, and our pedal of the week is the Mosky Golden Horse. Welcome to the guitar department. So the first thing we need to do is set up a little workstation, and what I've got here is a Music Nomad neck elevator that the shop provided here. And if you don't have something like that, you can just have anything that can make the guitar lay flat or have it slightly inclined. I have it inclined so it's a little bit easier to work with. My string broke right about here, just above the middle bridge, which is nice because that means I can just uncoil one side, just comes right off. And the other side, we're going to push down and it actually pops out the bottom. So you can see those 6 holes here at the bottom. Each one of those is where the string goes in to come back out through the top, and we'll demonstrate that here in a second. But one thing I want to do before we move on is I want to demonstrate one of the ways I knew that the strings needed to be changed. Beyond the fact that one of them broke, I'm going to do what I like to call the Kleenex test. I'm just going to take a piece of Kleenex, squeeze it around the string on either side, and then slide it on up, and what I'm left with is 2 dark black streaks. That is a sign that this guitar needs its strings changed. All of that is finger tarnish and oils, and it's all just kind of gross. Brand new strings wouldn't do that. So along the way, I'm going to clean up in between the strings. I'm just going to change this one string for now, but eventually I'm going to change all 6 of these. I'm going to get underneath the strings with this Kleenex. You don't need to use any sort of polish on this part of the guitar, but if you want to, you can. Certainly every shop sells some kind of polish. And then just a little bit down underneath the bridge pick up here too, because it gets really dusty underneath these strings. You want to make sure you clean your guitar every chance you get. All right, so that's done. Next up, I'm going to pull out the string. I've got a standard set of Ernie Ball Super Slinkies here. I'm just going to open it up, and you can see right here on the side of the package they have the gauges of the strings: 9, 11, 16, 24, 32, and 42. And those are the thicknesses of the string in hundredths of a millimeter. So they're all very thin. We are going to pull out the high E string, in this case the 9. Now, of course, you can buy thicker strings, you can buy 10s, 11s, and you can buy ones that have thicker low ends for the heavier, beefier sound, but still have the thinner high end. But in this case, I like the Super Slinkies. I'm going to pull it out. It comes nice and coiled up like this. We'll just unravel it. And it comes out just like that. And then I'll turn it this way so that you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go in that plastic hole. And then inside that plastic hole, there's a metal one that you have to go through also. And you can see it just comes out the top of the guitar like that. So I'll go ahead and pull it out. And when that little ball end hits the stopper, it stops moving, and the string is ready to be put on. Now, along the way, you could condition the neck with some guitar polish also. There's all kinds of wood polishers out there that do a fantastic job on guitar necks. But the real business end of it is down here on the headstock. Now, 2 things you want to make sure of when you do this. 1, you want to go around the tuning peg a couple of times. You don't want it just to be on there one coil, because then it won't stay in tune. It'll keep loosening itself. And you don't want to go around a bunch of times. You don't want to leave a lot of this excess string in there, because that will also hurt your tuning and your tone. So I'm going to go all the way around one time with the string still sort of loose. It's still kind of dangly on there. And then I'm going to push it through just like this. And then I'm going to pull tight on the active part of the string, the part that's going to end up on the guitar. And what we end up with is it sort of locks into position. It's not tied or anything. I could take it back out if I needed to, but We're going to keep it just like that, and then underneath the saddle here, the saddle's job is to put downward pressure on the string to keep it from popping out of the nut. And they do that because the headstock doesn't have any kind of downward slant. The whole neck of the guitar, all the way up through the headstock, is pretty much flat. There's no downward angle to it at all. You'll see the acoustic is a little different when we get to that one. Now here's where it gets a little tricky though, because the string is loose, and if I just leave it that way and start tuning, it just sort of does whatever it wants. You can see down here it's starting to lift up, and there's a chance that it could just pop over the tuning peg and not work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it under the saddle, and I'm going to put downward pressure on it right here, just to keep it in place. It's not pushing very hard, and then I have what's called a string winder to help me do this a little more quickly. You can string it with your fingers too. You can wind it that way. It just takes a little bit longer. So as I go, you can see we've got two different turns going. It's all the way around a couple times, and right there it's starting to get its own tension. Still very loose, but I'm going to stop putting the downward pressure on it. And there we go. And then the next step, I'm going to tune it up. Right now it's at a C. Good. And notice that I stopped using the string winder to do that. You don't want to tune with a string winder because it moves just too fast. But here's the other thing. It's not going to stay in tune. Brand new strings, when you put them on, they sort of, they have an elasticity to them. They're going to stretch, and they're going to adjust to the tension that they're under. They're under quite a bit of tension, actually, to get it this tight. So I don't know how well you can see on the tuner, but if I just pluck it, it says E. If I take the string, grab underneath it with 2 or 3 fingers, and I just pull up, just firmly enough to feel the tension, but not so firm that I actually break the string. It's a very delicate balance. And you can see the string has actually gone flat. So I'm going to retighten it. Get it nice and in tune, and then I'm going to repeat that process. You can hear it rubbing up against the groove of the nut when I do that too. So it went out of tune again, but just a little bit less. So I'm going to tighten that up, and that one's probably okay. And that's how you change a string on a standard Stratocaster style bridge electric guitar. So next, I'm going to show you how to do the same thing. I'm going to replace the high E string, but this time it's going to be on a standard acoustic. And the main difference between these, and really the main difference between most types of different guitar string changing techniques, lies in the bridge. You can see here, the bridge is completely different. If I hold this up, what we have in place of the through the back system is a bridge pin system. And here's how that works. The first thing I'm going to do is loosen the string, because in this case, the string didn't break. These just are old and need to be replaced. So I'm going to take the high E string, and I'm just plucking it to make sure I'm going the correct direction. If the note goes down, that means the string is getting looser. And that should be plenty loose. So I'm going to run down here. I'll give that another turn just to make sure I can get over that tuning peg down here. And again, these are metal strings that are wrapped really tightly around this tuning peg. So that means that they are basically bent into position. So when I pull it off, you'll notice the string actually keeps that same coil, which is what makes clipping the string when you're changing an electric guitar string more important, because to pull this coil through the bottom of an electric guitar is actually kind of tricky and can be problematic. But in this case, we don't have to worry about that. The string is off of the tuning peg, and now we're going to come down here to the bridge pin, and I'm going to go back to my string winder for this. Now there's a lot of ways to get these off, but one of the more convenient methods is this little notch on the edge of the tuning string winder. And so I'm going to slide that underneath the bridge pin. And when I did that, I haven't pulled up at all. I just slid underneath, and you can see it's a little bit raised from where it was, where the other 5 are. So now I can just pull that out. I could have done that with my fingers also, pulled it out. But when they're under tension like this, you really can't pull them out. You have to have something to dislodge them. And that's where the edge of the string winder comes into play. So I'm going to set this aside, and we'll pull our string out. And just for the sake of having it out of the way, I'm going to recoil it up, wrap it around itself a couple times, and set it aside. That should do right there. And then now I've got some a different kind of Ernie Ball string. These are the Ernie Ball earth wounds. This is a light gauge, and you can see right away the numbers are actually much higher this time: 11, 15, 22, 30, 42, and 52. The reason for that is that the acoustic guitar has to produce all the sound on its own. It doesn't get to run through an amplifier the way an electric guitar does. There's no pickup system in this specific guitar. It's just a standard dreadnought acoustic guitar. So if you put electric guitar strings on it, the thinner strings really give you a much thinner sound. Electric guitars don't have a resonant chamber. They're solid body for the most part, and so the pickups do all the work in terms of the tone. With the acoustic, it has to echo and resonate through the sound hole and through the top wood, and then project. So the thicker strings are really important. We'll go ahead and open this up. And there is our high E string. It is an 11 gauge. Again, that's 11 1/100ths of a millimeter. Pull that out. And we'll uncoil it just like with the electrics. It should unwind itself. And again, it's metal, so make sure you don't just yank. You could end up putting a kink in the string. And I have one more thing that I'm going to do with this, that with the thinner strings you can just do with your fingernails, but with the thicker strings you may need a set of pliers to do. And that is, I'm going to take the ball end, I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm going to fold it just a little bit so that it's more on one side than on the other. It's not just even with the string anymore. And the reason I'm going to do that is that when you put it in, the bridge pin pushes that ball end underneath the bottom of the bridge, and that's what helps keep it under tension, is that it's pulling up on the bridge as well as pulling inward towards the nut. So now we insert the string, and actually what I'll do is I'll grab the bridge pin. The bridge pin has just a little groove in it. This is a pretty old one, but it's got a groove that the string is going to ride in, so I'll just sort of line them up. We'll put that in, and then squeeze that down so that it's under pressure. And then we'll pull up here. Now, one of the other things that I should have mentioned with the electric, but is also very important with the acoustic, is that the strings go on the tuning peg a certain way. If I hold this up, you should notice that all of the strings come off to the inside of the headstock. None of them are wound to the outside so that they don't impact the other tuning pegs. That also helps with tuning, because that means that they'll all be tuned in the same direction. So when you're doing an electric, you want to make sure that they all come off from the top to the bottom. You want to make sure the string comes off on the bottom edge of the neck, just like these top 3 do. When it's a 3 on one side and 3 on the other, you want to make sure they all come off to the inside and not the outside. That way they don't impact the other tuning pegs, and they're all tuned the same direction. So, when I'm putting it on, I will loop it around. Again, I'll give it just a little bit of attention so that it's not too tight. Loop it around one time and push it through. Oops. A little hole in the tuning peg here. And then once I've got it to about this little loop right here, I'm going to pull on the active part of the string just to give myself a little bit more string to work with. And that will ensure that it loops around a couple extra times. And again, I've come off to the inside when I did that. That's where the technique actually lies, is when you're putting the string on the tuning peg. Now, what I'm going to do is essentially the same thing I did on the electric, except this time we don't have a saddle. You might notice that while the guitar and the neck are flat, the headstock has a downward slope to it. So we don't have any saddle to string this under to keep the tension downward. The downward slope will take care of that. So I'll just hold it behind the nut like this, and I'm going to do that with my left hand so that I can use my right hand to turn the tuning peg. And then as I do that, I'm going pretty slow. I want to make sure the excess part of the string goes over the active part of the string so that it doesn't end up underneath the coils, and it'll make it easier to clip when we're all done. So we're on our second turn. Here comes our third. And you can see the string is tightening up just a little bit. These acoustic strings are going to be under a little bit more tension, so I'm going to make sure it goes around a third or maybe even a fourth time. Getting a little tighter here. And at that point, I can take my finger off, and we'll revert back to the tuner. That has quite a ways to go, but I'm still going to just use my fingers. And there, again, it's in tune, but we're not done yet. What I'm going to do is the same thing I did with the electric string. I'm going to grab underneath, usually down by the sound hole, and then slide up to about the 12th fret. And the significance of the 12th fret is that it is the halfway point of the active part of the string. From the bridge to the nut, the 12th fret is the halfway point. So that's going to mean that it's the easiest place for me to pull up, and also the most efficient distribution of the pressure. So we'll pull up. Let's give it a little bounce. Again, firm enough that I can feel the tension, but not so firm that it's going to break. And then we've gone down an entire half step. So tighten that up. And I've gone a little bit sharp. You can see the E isn't quite in tune. And that's actually okay because we're going to repeat this process anyway. And it's going to go a little bit lower. Just below, and then I'll make sure that's tightened all the way up. And there we go. And then the last step, I had skipped this part with the electric, but the last step is to take the excess string here and use a set of wire clippers to clip it off. Just like this. And then something I like to do that sort of helps protect your case and can even help protect your fingers in certain circumstances is I take this little bit of excess string that's still left there, and with the little groove at the tip of the wire cutters, I like to push it downward. And again, it's metal, so it can be bent. And when it bends, it goes inward towards the headstock of the guitar, and that way it can't poke your fingers just by touching it. You can touch anywhere up here, and there's no danger of having your finger pricked by the end of the string. And that's how you change a string on a standard acoustic bridge pin style guitar. Now it's time for our lick of the week, and for this week I've stolen a lick from Carlos Santana. If you've ever heard the song Black Magic Woman, he does this at the end of the second solo, And it's a pretty standard D minor pentatonic scale lick in the standard box form of the pentatonic. So our scale is going to be starting on the 10th fret, 10, 13, 10, 12, 10, 12, 10, 12, and then the last two are 10, 13 again. And then for the second part of the lick, we're going to drop down and start on the 5th fret of the D string and cover a different form of the same scale. In this case, it'll be 5, 7, down a string, 5, 7, and then 6. So the whole lick sounds like this. So what he's doing there is plucking on the 10th fret with the pointer finger on the bottom string, the first string. You're going to pluck and then hammer on 3 times to the 13th fret, just on one pluck. So 10, 13, 10, 13, 10, 13. Hammer, pull, hammer, pull, hammer, pull. And then you go up a string, and you're going to go twice, the same technique on the second string. So 10, 13, 10, 13, 10. And then up another string, 10, 12, 10, 12, 10. And then on the next string up, the 4th string, you go 12, 10. Then you're going to drop all the way down to the 5th fret on the same string and go 5, 6, 7, 5, 7 on the 3rd string, and then 5, 6. You're going to hammer on from 5 to 6. Give a little bit of vibrato, just sort of shake the note. And that's our lick of the week. Now it's time for us to enter the tone zone, and this week we have an extra special pedal of the week. It's called the Mosky Golden Horse. And to briefly give an explanation as to what this actually is, there was a pedal that was made in the early 90s that was called the Klon Centaur. And the Klon Centaur is a very boutique overdrive pedal. It's really popular, it was back in the day, and it's really popular today amongst blues and rock players who are looking for that overdriven sound. However, they only made about 8,000 of them. They were all handmade, and all 8,000 are accounted for, and if you want to buy one, you can find them for roughly $4,000 on reverb.com. If you don't have that kind of money, as a lot of us don't, you can buy what's called a clone. And the guy who designed the Klon Centaur eventually made a clone of his own. It's called the Klon KTR, and they sell for between $250 and $300, and they are very quality. He actually apologizes on the packaging for it, for all the hype surrounding the pedal itself. However, in recent years, a whole market of extremely cheap clone pedals has come out. There's Wish.com sells one, and just about every small pedal manufacturer has some type of clone of the Klon Centaur. There's the Soul Food, there is the Golden Centaur, there's the Horseman from Nux. There's all sorts of different versions of it, and most recently I've seen this one sort of blowing up the websites that I'm on. So I thought I'd take a look at it, and here's what I've found. It's a pretty good clone of the original Centaur. It's not perfect, but it sounds pretty good even just as a standalone overdrive. For the record, it costs about $30 brand new, so it's a much different price point than even the official clones of the Centaur. So I've got it set up to be a standalone pedal right now, and here's what it sounds like. For reference, here's my clean tone with this beautiful Hagstrom guitar running through the Fender Twin Reverb Tone Master series. If I flip it back on, you'll notice I've got the treble setting basically flat at noon, and I've got the the overdrive, the gain, turned to about 2 o'clock, giving us a little bit of heavy gain. And I've got the output set so that it doesn't really inflate the sound too much, but let me turn up the gain all the way just to show you the range. So it's got a pretty good sound all its own. Now, here's the other element to this, though. One of the main, most popular uses for both the Klon Centaur and its clones is to use as a clean boost. And here's how you would do that. Let me turn all of these down. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave the treble where it is. I'm going to turn the gain almost all the way down. Not completely to 0, but almost all the way. And then I'm going to turn the output almost all the way up. So the output's at about 2 o'clock, maybe 3. And again, without any reference, you can see it's just kind of louder. So if I don't have it on, and then I flip it back on, and that's the effect of what they call a transparent overdrive, where it's not supposed to affect your original tone. It's just supposed to add this clipping effect to the original tone. So it shouldn't be messing too much with the tone coming through the amp. It should just be making it louder. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to run it through a tube screamer. The Ibanez TS9, we've covered in another show. We reviewed it once. It's a classic pedal used by so many artists along the way, Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Mayer. It's a pretty prolific blues pedal. So let me flip off the Golden Horse, and here is the Ibanez TS9 on its own. And I've got the level set a little bit quieter just for the effect that we're trying to get here. Otherwise, I would have that turned up just a hair more. But the tone and the gain are set to just about 12 o'clock. And then I'm going to turn the Mosky Golden Horse on. And the Golden Horse is first in this chain. So the signal's coming from my guitar into the Mosky Golden Horse, then into the TS9 Tube Screamer, and then into, again, the Fender Twin Reverb amp. So again, if I turn off the Golden Horse, if I turn it back on, you notice the tone hasn't really changed a whole lot, but it's pushing that tube screamer a little bit more. It's getting a little bit more of that clipping effect out of it while not affecting the tone along the way a little, as much as you would think. So using it as a clean boost is actually one of the more common ways to use both the Mosky Golden Horse and the Klon Centaur and all of the clones of that pedal that have come along over the years. And that's our pedal of the week, the Mosky Golden Horse. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Guitar Department. I've been your host, Joe Alton. I want to thank our producer, Bryce Jarrett, and our camera person, Pat. I want to thank Riemann Music for giving us a place to shoot this show and for supplying the Fender Tone Master Twin Reverb, as well as this beautiful Hagstrom Phantom. And yeah, this is a fantastic guitar. Thank you guys for tuning in, and feel free to join us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Guitar Department, and feel free to join us next time right here on The Guitar Department.